What would you do if on your blind date, a simple woman approached you and said, "Excuse me, I brought my mom"? Most men would run away without thinking twice. But Eduardo, a successful businessman from Monterrey who had stopped believing in love, did something no one expected. This is the story of how a simple act of kindness and empathy can transform everything. Stay until the end, because what this man decided to do will leave you completely speechless and make you believe in genuine love again. Eduardo turned off the computer and looked at the clock in his office in downtown Monterrey. It was 9 o'clock at night on any given Tuesday, and once again he found himself alone among papers and contracts. At 37 years old, he had built an empire in the technology sector, but his personal life was an empty desert. Relationships had taken a back seat so long ago that he didn't even remember the last time he went out with someone real. His phone vibrated on the desk, and the name Javier, his friend since elementary school, appeared. He answered expecting the usual chat, but Javier had other plans. "I got you a date, buddy. Don't tell me no." Eduardo sighed, tired. "You know I don't have time for that." But Javier insisted with a voice that wouldn't take no for an answer. "This time is different, I swear on my mother. I met an amazing girl, and I know she is perfect for you." Eduardo had heard that before, too many times, and it always ended the same way: forced conversations with women who only saw his bank account. Love for him had become something abstract, almost unreal, something he saw in movies, but that didn't exist in his world. However, something in his friend's voice made him hesitate. Javier had never sounded so convinced. After half an hour of insistence, Eduardo finally gave in. Okay. But if it's another one of those stuck-up girls who just want a sugar daddy, I swear I won't talk to you again." Javier let out a laugh on the other end of the line. "I promise you, brother, this one is different. She has values. She has heart. Just give me this chance." Eduardo accepted with resignation, more to get Javier off his back than out of true hope. They agreed that the meeting would be Friday night, at one of the most elegant restaurants in San Pedro Garza Garcia. When he hung up, Eduardo stayed looking at the illuminated city through the large window of his office. He wondered when he had stopped believing in love, at what moment he had decided that work was enough to fill his existence. He remembered his mother, who passed away when he was barely 18, and how she always told him that money would never warm his bed nor dry his tears. He had spent almost 20 years proving to the world that he could triumph alone, but deep down, he knew something was missing. That night, while driving toward his empty apartment in the most exclusive zone of Monterrey, he felt a small tickle of curiosity that he hadn't experienced in years. The following days passed in the usual routine of meetings, negotiations, and business decisions. Eduardo was respected and admired in the business world, but no one really knew the man behind the impeccable suit. His employees saw him as someone fair but distant, successful but lonely. Thursday night, while checking emails in his study, his phone rang again. It was Javier again, reminding him of the date the next day. "Don't you think about flaking, buddy? I already spoke with Camila, and she is very excited." Eduardo felt a pang of nervousness he hadn't experienced since adolescence. "What is her name, did you say?" "Camila," Javier responded with enthusiasm. "She is 28 years old. She is a nurse. And believe me when I tell you she is one of the good ones. She isn't looking for a wallet. She is looking for a companion. Eduardo mentally noted those details. A nurse, someone who took care of others, someone with a purpose beyond money. That was already different from the last dates he had been on. Maybe Javier was right this time. Maybe it was worth giving this a real chance. Friday dawned with a clear sky over Monterrey, and Eduardo found himself thinking about the date more times than he wanted to admit. During an important meeting with Japanese investors, his mind wandered, imagining what this Camila would be like. Would she be shy or extroverted? Would she have that calculating look he detested so much, or something genuine in her eyes? At 6 p.m, he arrived at his apartment and realized he didn't know what to wear. It had been so long since he dressed up to impress someone that he felt ridiculous in front of the closet full of executive suits. Finally, he opted for something more casual but elegant: dark dress pants and a shirt without a tie. He looked at himself in the mirror and saw a man who had forgotten how to smile naturally. While putting on a little cologne, he thought of his mother again. She would have been happy to see him trying again, to see him opening his heart, even if only a crack. At 8 o'clock sharp, he got into his SUV and drove toward the restaurant, with his heart beating faster than normal. He had no idea that that night would change his life forever. The Friday traffic in San Pedro was heavy, but Eduardo arrived at the restaurant 5 minutes before 9. It was a sophisticated place with a view of the mountain, lit with warm lights and decorated with impeccable taste. The valet took his keys while he breathed deeply and prepared mentally. Javier had sent him a photo of Camila so he could recognize her, and Eduardo had seen it briefly. A girl of simple appearance, with a shy smile and eyes that seemed kind. Nothing like the runway models that some of his partners showed off. He entered the restaurant and gave his name to the host. His reservation was ready, a discreet table by the window. The waiter guided him there, and Eduardo sat down, ordering a whiskey to calm his nerves. He looked at his watch, 9:05. Surely she would arrive at any moment. He wondered if she would be as nervous as him, if she had also spent the afternoon thinking about what to wear and what to say. He took a sip of his drink and observed the entrance of the restaurant, waiting to see the woman appear who his best friend swore was perfect for him. What he didn't know was that Camila wouldn't arrive alone, and that would change everything. What was about to happen would challenge everything Eduardo thought he knew about love. At 9:15, Eduardo saw movement at the entrance of the restaurant, and his heart skipped a beat. A slim young woman in a simple dress appeared at the reception, but she wasn't alone. Walking next to her was an older lady with gray hair and a face marked by the years. Eduardo narrowed his eyes, trying to understand the scene. Maybe it was another customer, he thought. But when the host pointed toward his table, and both the women began to walk in his direction, he understood that something very unusual was happening. The young woman he recognized as Camila advanced with insecure steps, biting her lower lip, while the older lady followed her with her gaze lowered and her hands clasped in front of her. Eduardo stood up out of courtesy, but his mind was working at 1,000 miles per hour, trying to process what he was seeing. When they arrived at the table, Camila opened her mouth before he could even say hello. "Excuse me, I brought my mom." Her voice trembled slightly, and her cheeks were red with embarrassment. Eduardo remained frozen for an instant, looking alternately at Camila and the lady who remained standing next to her. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a misunderstanding. She had really brought her mother to a blind date. The restaurant continued with its elegant murmur around them. But at that table, the silence was deafening. Eduardo noticed how Camila's hands trembled slightly while she held her purse. The older lady, whom he assumed was Rosa, kept her gaze fixed on the floor as if she wanted to disappear. There was something in her hunched posture that spoke of years of sacrifice and exhaustion. Eduardo had expected many things from that night. Boring conversation, unfulfilled expectations, perhaps another disappointment for his collection. But this was completely unexpected. Camila continued talking with a broken voice. The words coming out rushed. I know this is very strange, and I would understand if you want to leave. It wasn't my intention to ruin the night. But my mom, she hasn't been well lately, and I couldn't leave her alone. Eduardo observed how the young woman's eyes filled with held-back tears. It wasn't acting. It wasn't manipulation. It was genuine terror of being rejected, mixed with a love so deep for her mother that she had been willing to risk this date. Rosa finally looked up, and her eyes met Eduardo's. Forgive me, sir. I told my daughter not to come, that I would be fine alone. But she insisted. Eduardo felt something stir inside his chest. For years he had dealt with fake people, interested only in his money and his position. He had met women who faked entire personalities just to impress him. But here, in front of him, were two completely real, vulnerable women, awaiting his judgment. Camila had already started to take a step back, preparing to flee, when Eduardo finally reacted. Wait, he said with a firm but kind voice. Don't go. Both women looked at him in surprise. Eduardo went around the table and pulled out a third chair, placing it next to his. Mrs. Rosa, right? Please sit down. The old woman blinked in confusion, looking at her daughter as if asking for permission. Eduardo signaled the waiter who was watching the scene from afar. Young man, we need one more place setting, please. Camila opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Eduardo turned to her with a small smile. You too, Camila. Sit down. We aren't going to have a date standing up. The words came out with a warmth he didn't know he possessed. Rosa sat down slowly, with the careful movements of someone afraid of taking up too much space. Camila let herself fall into her chair, still processing that he hadn't kicked them out. The waiter arrived quickly with the additional silverware and the menus. Eduardo took his, but addressed Rosa directly. Ma'am, what do you like to eat? Rosa looked at him with huge eyes, clearly not used to someone asking her preferences. I don't know, sir. Whatever is fine. Eduardo shook his head gently. None of that whatever. Tonight is special, and we are all going to order what we really want. Do you like seafood? Rosa nodded shyly. And then I recommend the sea bass. It's exquisite here. And for an appetizer, the small shrimp empanadas. Does that sound good? The woman nodded again, now with a hint of a smile on her lips. Camila watched the scene as if she were witnessing a miracle. Eduardo turned to her. And you, Camila? The young woman took a moment to respond, still in shock. Me? The chicken mole is fine. Eduardo placed the order with the waiter and asked for a bottle of sparkling water. When the young man retired, Eduardo leaned back in his chair and looked at the two women in front of him. Now, are you going to tell me why a normal date turned into a family dinner? His tone was light, without judgment, almost playful. Camila took a deep breath and began to speak, now more calmly. My dad passed away 2 years ago. It was very sudden. A heart attack. Since then, my mom, well, she hasn't been the same. Eduardo nodded, encouraging her to continue. I work as a nurse on the night shift at the university hospital, explained Camila. And lately, my mom has been very fragile emotionally. She has days where she almost doesn't leave her room. When Javier told me about you, I really wanted to come. But today my mom woke up especially sad, and I couldn't. Her voice broke slightly. I couldn't leave her alone. Eduardo watched how Rosa took her daughter's hand on the table, squeezing it with tenderness. The gesture was so pure, so full of unconditional love, that he felt a lump in his throat. He looked Rosa directly in the eyes. And you wanted her to come? Rosa nodded vehemently. Of course. My Camila deserves to be happy, to find a good man. But lately I have been a burden to her. Eduardo shook his head firmly. A mother is never a burden, Mrs. Rosa. Never. The 3 words fell into the space between them, like stones in a quiet lake, creating ripples of emotion. What Eduardo didn't know was that those words had just opened a door that had been closed for years in his own heart. The dishes arrived at the table with impeccable presentation, but none of the 3 paid real attention to the food. Eduardo had created an atmosphere where Rosa and Camila could finally breathe without feeling judged. While the waiter served Rosa's sea bass, Eduardo noticed how the lady's hands kept trembling slightly as she picked up the silverware. There was something in her fragility that reminded him of his own mother in her final days, when the illness had consumed her slowly. Camila picked at her chicken mole without real appetite, still processing that this man hadn't run away. Eduardo took a sip of water and decided he needed to understand the full story. Mrs. Rosa, Camila told me you lost your husband 2 years ago. What was he like? The question took Rosa by surprise. No one asked her about her late husband. Most only offered empty condolences and changed the subject quickly. Her eyes moistened, but a soft smile appeared on her face. He was a good man, Mr. Eduardo, hard-working, dedicated to his family. He was a truck driver for 30 years. Rosa's voice became firmer as she spoke. We met when I was 20, and he was 23. We had nothing, but we built everything together. Eduardo listened with genuine attention, something Camila noticed immediately. Most of the men she had met in the past only feigned interest while checking their phones or looking at other women. But Eduardo was completely present, his eyes fixed on Rosa with sincere respect. My mom worked all her life, too. Camila intervened with pride in her voice. She was a caregiver for the elderly in a nursing home. Rosa nodded, discreetly wiping away a tear. I took care of so many people for 40 years that I lost count. Some treated me well, others not so much. But I always gave my best, because that was my calling. Eduardo felt a pang of admiration. This woman had dedicated her entire life to the service of others, had raised her daughter alone after her husband passed away, and now found herself fighting with loneliness and pain. There was nothing weak about that. It was the story of a silent warrior. And after your husband passed away, How have you coped with everything? Eduardo asked delicately. Camila looked at her mother before answering. It has been difficult. I work night shifts at the hospital, and many times I come home and find my mom crying in the kitchen. Rosa lowered her gaze, ashamed. I don't want to be a burden to my daughter. Eduardo put his silverware aside and leaned slightly forward. Allow me to tell you something, Mrs. Rosa, and I hope this doesn't sound disrespectful. His tone was serious but warm. You dedicated 40 years of your life caring for strangers. You raised your daughter alone while working. You built a family with love and sacrifice. Now you are going through deep grief and need support. That doesn't make you a burden. That makes you human. The words fell upon Rosa like a healing balm. No one, not even her own relatives, had validated her pain in that way. Camila felt her heart expand as she watched this man, whom she had just met, show more empathy than people who had known her mother for years. Eduardo continued. My mother died when I was 18. Cancer. It was fast and brutal. Rosa looked at him with eyes full of understanding. I'm so sorry, Mr. Eduardo. The young businessman nodded gratefully. I was in my first year of university, building my dream empire. She asked me to visit her more often, to spend time with her. But I was always busy with exams, projects, ambitions. His voice broke slightly. When she died, I realized I had traded years of memories for grades that now mean nothing. The restaurant was still full of people, waiters coming and going, conversations of other diners creating a background murmur. But at that table, the world had reduced to 3 people, sharing painful truths. Rosa extended her wrinkled hand and placed it over Eduardo's. You were young, my son. Don't punish yourself so much. Eduardo looked at that hand over his and felt something he hadn't experienced in almost 20 years. The maternal touch of someone offering comfort without expecting anything in return. That is why I understand perfectly what Camila is doing, continued Eduardo, looking now at the young nurse. She is choosing to be present now while she still can. She is putting the people she loves above social expectations or what others think. That isn't weakness, that is strength. Camila felt tears rolling down her cheeks without being able to control them. For months, she had listened to friends, co-workers, and even some relatives telling her she had to live her life, that her mother needed to become independent, that she was overprotecting her. But here was a man she had just met, validating the most important decision of her life. Eduardo took his napkin and extended it to her. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you cry. Camila shook her head, accepting the napkin. Don't apologize. No one had understood me like that before. Rosa watched the interaction between her daughter and Eduardo with a mixture of amazement and hope. She had prayed so much for Camila to find a good man, someone who saw beyond her complicated situation. She had lost faith that men like that existed after seeing how 3 previous suitors had disappeared when they discovered that Camila came as a package deal, as some had cruelly said. But this Eduardo was different. She saw it in the way he spoke, in how he looked at her with genuine respect, in how he treated her daughter not as an opportunity, but as a valuable human being. The waiter approached discreetly. Do you wish for dessert or coffee? Eduardo looked at his companions. It's my treat, whatever you want. Rosa refused shyly, but Eduardo insisted. They told me the Neapolitan flan here is the best in all of Monterey. Are you up for it? Camila nodded with a smile that was beginning to be more natural. My mom loves flan. Then 3 flans and 3 coffees, ordered Eduardo. When the waiter retired, Eduardo stood up. Excuse me a moment. He headed to the bathroom, but in reality, he needed to process everything he was feeling. He washed his face with cold water and looked at himself in the mirror. What is happening to you? He asked himself, but deep down he already knew the answer. For the first time in almost 20 years, someone had managed to touch the part of him he thought was dead. When Eduardo returned to the table, he found Rosa and Camila conversing in low voices. They fell silent when they saw him approaching, but he noticed that both looked more relaxed than at the beginning of the night. The flans arrived moments later, presented with elegance on fine porcelain plates. Rosa took the first spoonful and closed her eyes, savoring it. It is delicious, she murmured with genuine joy. Eduardo smiled, seeing her reaction. It was beautiful to see how something as simple as a good dessert could bring happiness to someone who clearly didn't allow herself many pleasures. Camila ate her flan, observing the interaction between her mother and this extraordinary man. There was something almost magical in how Eduardo had transformed what should have been a total disaster into a memorable evening. Mr. Eduardo, began Rosa with a timid voice, can I ask you something personal? Eduardo nodded, putting down his fork. Of course, Mrs. Rosa. Why didn't you get upset when we arrived? Any other man would have thought we were crazy. Eduardo considered the question carefully before answering. You know, for years I have dealt with people who pretend to be what they are not. Women who dress up and act a certain way because they investigate how much money I have. His voice was reflective, without bitterness or resentment. But you two arrived here being completely authentic. That is more valuable than 1,000 perfectly orchestrated dates. Rosa exchanged a look with her daughter, both processing Eduardo's words. Camila had been about to flee the restaurant, convinced she had ruined any chance of a real connection. But Eduardo had not only stayed, he had made both feel welcome and respected. Besides, continued Eduardo with a smile that lit up his face, my friend Javier told me Camila was special. He didn't mention she came with an incredible mom included in the package. It's a 2-for-1 deal that anyone should consider a blessing. Rosa let out a laugh that sounded like music after so much silence. She hadn't laughed like that in months, with a light heart and without the constant heaviness of sadness. Camila covered her mouth, trying to contain her own laughter, her cheeks blushing. You have a very particular way of seeing things, Mr. Eduardo. Eduardo shrugged with humility. Or maybe the world has a very strange way of complicating the simple. You showed me more honesty in 30 minutes than many people in whole years. They finished their desserts while the conversation flowed more naturally, as if the 3 had known each other for a long time. Eduardo told them about his technology company, but not in a presumptuous way, but explaining how he had started with a borrowed laptop in a small apartment. Rosa shared stories from her time caring for the elderly, some sad, but many full of unexpected humor and tenderness. Night had fallen completely over Monterey, and the city lights shone like earthly stars through the restaurant windows. The place was beginning to empty slowly, the nearby tables becoming unoccupied one by one as the last diners retired. Eduardo asked for the check, But before it arrived, he turned toward Rosa with a thoughtful and serious expression. "Mrs. Rosa, would you like to walk with me through the restaurant's garden? I would like to talk a little more with you." Rosa blinked in surprise, looking at her daughter for guidance or approval. Camila was just as baffled, but nodded encouragingly, curious about what Eduardo had in mind. Eduardo stood up and extended his arm like a gentleman from another era with natural elegance. "It would do me a great honor to get to know the most important person in Camila's life." Rosa took his arm with trembling hands, still not fully believing what was happening on that extraordinary night. Camila watched them walk away toward the garden, lit with dim lights and tropical plants that created a magical atmosphere. She remained alone at the table, her heart beating strongly while she processed everything that had occurred. What was really happening? Who was this man who treated her mother as if she were someone important instead of a hindrance or an annoying burden? The question swirled in her mind like a whirlwind while she saw the two silhouettes walking slowly between the garden paths. For the first time in a long time, Camila allowed herself to feel something she had buried deeply for fear of disappointments: true hope. In the garden, Eduardo and Rosa walked slowly, respecting the tired pace of the older woman, who clearly wasn't used to these luxuries. The night air was fresh and pleasant, perfumed with the scent of the poinsettia flowers that decorated the place with their vibrant colors. "Tell me about yourself, Mrs. Rosa," said Eduardo, breaking the comfortable silence that had formed between them. "How was your life before everything changed with the loss of your husband?" Rosa took a deep breath, organizing decades of memories that crowded her mind. "I was born on a small ranch near Saltillo. We were poor but happy, very united as a family." Her voice became softer upon remembering. "My father worked the land, and my mother made tortillas to sell in the town market. I met my husband at a fair. He was from Monterey, but had gone to visit distant family. We fell in love in 3 days and got married 6 months later, against the opinion of many who said it was too fast." Eduardo listened with genuine attention, imagining young Rosa full of dreams and hopes for the future. "We moved to Monterey and lived in a humble tenement in the Independencia neighborhood," continued Rosa with nostalgia. "My husband drove his truck, and I started working, caring for an older lady in the neighborhood who needed help. I discovered I was good at it, that I had patience and natural affection for the elderly who suffered from loneliness." Eduardo nodded, understanding. "That's why you dedicated yourself to that for 40 years of your life." Rosa smiled with evident pride. "Yes, Mr. Eduardo, I cared for so many, saw so many depart from this world. Some left me small inheritances and gratitude, others just a sincere thank you. But everyone taught me something valuable about life, death, and what really matters in the end." They arrived at a wrought iron bench, and Eduardo helped Rosa sit down carefully, noticing how her knees hurt her. He sat beside her, and in that moment, both knew that this conversation would change the course of many lives. Eduardo looked at the city lights in the distance, while searching for the right words to continue the conversation. "And Camila, what was it like raising her alone for so many years?" he asked with genuine interest in his voice. Rosa lit up completely when speaking of her daughter, as if an inner light turned on in her chest. "It was the best thing that happened to me in life, Mr. Eduardo. She was born when I was 34 years old, after I had lost hope of being a mother. I thought God wouldn't give me that blessing. Her voice filled with deep emotion, remembering those moments. She was always a noble girl, studious, responsible from a very young age. She wanted to be a nurse since she was 6 years old because she saw me care for my patients with so much affection. Eduardo smiled, imagining a little Camila following in her mother's footsteps with childish admiration. "You must be very proud of her," he commented with sincerity. Rosa nodded with tears shining in her eyes. "Very, Mr. Eduardo. She worked hard to pay for her degree. She studied at night and worked during the day as an assistant in a clinic. She never complained. She never asked for unnecessary material things. She just wanted to help people, just like I did." Eduardo felt a pang of admiration toward both women. The night breeze gently moved the leaves of the plants around the garden, creating a natural and relaxing whisper. "And when did your husband pass away?" asked Eduardo delicately, aware that he was touching a wound still fresh and painful. Rosa's expression darkened visibly, as if a cloud had covered the moon on her face. "It was at dawn, Mr. Eduardo. A massive heart attack that gave him no chance to fight or say goodbye to us. One day he was planning his retirement, talking about traveling to Veracruz to visit his brother, and the next he was no longer there." Her voice broke slightly. "There was no time to tell him how much I loved him one last time, to thank him for the 38 years we spent together building our family." Eduardo put his hand over Rosa's in a gesture of sincere comfort. "I am so sorry, Mrs. Rosa. I cannot imagine such great pain." The woman nodded, discreetly wiping the tears that rolled down her wrinkled cheeks. "The worst wasn't losing him, although that was terrible and shattered my heart. The worst was losing my purpose in life after so many years of having it clear. During my entire existence, I cared for others, my elderly patients, my hardworking husband, my beautiful daughter." Eduardo listened with an attention that Rosa hadn't experienced in a long time, not even from her own relatives. And suddenly, I realized that I no longer knew who I was without someone to care for or protect. Continued Rosa with a trembling voice. "I felt empty, useless, like a ship without a course in the middle of the ocean." Eduardo understood perfectly what she was describing, because he had felt something similar. You defined yourself by what you gave to others for decades. And when you could no longer give in the same way because your husband departed, you felt lost and without direction. Rosa looked at him with eyes full of gratitude and surprise. "Exactly that, Mr. Eduardo. How do you know it so well? How can you understand something that not even my own brothers understand?" Eduardo smiled with sadness. "Because I also lost myself when my mother died, and I took refuge in work until I forgot who I really was." Rosa studied his face under the dim light, seeing beyond the facade of the successful businessman. There was pain in those young eyes, an ancient pain she recognized because it lived in her own chest day after day. "You have also suffered a lot, haven't you?" Eduardo nodded slowly. "More than I have told anyone in years, Mrs. Rosa. There are wounds one learns to hide so well that one even forgets they exist." The garden was almost deserted now, only the two of them sharing confidences under the stars that were beginning to appear in the Monterey sky. "And my poor Camila has carried my sadness when she should be living her own life without worries. said Rosa with evident guilt. She has turned down job opportunities at other hospitals with better pay because she doesn't want to leave me alone for many hours. She has stopped going out with friends because she prefers to stay with me watching soap operas in the living room. Eduardo shook his head firmly, his expression serious but kind. No, Mrs. Rosa, Camila is living her life exactly as it should be, with true love and unshakable loyalty toward the one who raised her. Rosa dried her tears with an embroidered handkerchief she took from her purse, a gift her late husband had given her years ago. You are very kind, Mr. Eduardo, but I know I have driven other men away from my daughter unintentionally. I have seen them run when they realize our situation, when they understand that we are an inseparable package. I have seen the disappointment in Camila's eyes every time that happens, and it destroys my soul. Eduardo leaned forward, his voice firm and full of absolute conviction. Do you know what I think, Mrs. Rosa? That those men didn't deserve Camila for even a second. If they cannot see the immense value of a woman who cares for her mother, then they do not have the capacity to truly love anyone in this world. His words fell upon Rosa like a healing balm she had been waiting for months without knowing it. Eduardo continued with contained passion. Any man who feels threatened or annoyed by a daughter's love for her mother is a coward who deserves neither her time nor her attention. Rosa felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she had carried since her husband's death. You are different from all the men Camila has met, Mr. Eduardo. I can see it in your eyes, in the way you treated us tonight. Eduardo took Rosa's wrinkled hands between his. My love, I cannot give you anything in return. You and Camila showed me pure love tonight, without hidden agendas or selfish interests. That is more valuable than all the money I have earned in my entire life. Rosa felt fresh tears rolling down her cheeks, but this time they weren't of sadness, but of relief and renewed hope. Does it really not bother you that I am here? That we are a package deal, as some say? Eduardo smiled with genuine warmth. Mrs. Rosa, your presence isn't a problem. It is a blessing that reminds me of what really matters in this life, so short that we have. Rosa hugged him impulsively, something she wouldn't normally do with a stranger, but Eduardo no longer felt like one. In that hug, two lonely souls found the comfort they had been seeking without knowing it. When Eduardo and Rosa returned to the restaurant, after almost 20 minutes in the garden, they found Camila standing next to the table. The young nurse had gathered her purse and her mother's sweater, clearly preparing to leave as soon as possible. Her face showed a mixture of anxiety and resignation, as if she had already accepted that the night had been a total failure. Upon seeing Eduardo and Rosa approach, Camila bit her lower lip nervously. It's late, and we don't want to take up more of your time, Mr. Eduardo, she said quickly with a trembling voice. We thank you very much for the dinner and your kindness, but we must go now. Eduardo exchanged a look with Rosa, who gave him a small nod of encouragement and complicity. Wait, Camila, said Eduardo with a firm but gentle voice. Why are you in such a hurry to leave? The young woman lowered her gaze, ashamed. Because I already ruined this night enough, bringing my mom to a date that was supposed to be just between us two. I am sure you have better things to do than deal with our complicated situation. Eduardo approached her and waited until Camila looked up to meet his eyes. Who said you ruined anything? He asked with genuine confusion on his face. Camila blinked, bewildered, not fully understanding what she was hearing from this extraordinary man. Well, it's obvious, isn't it? I arrived with my mom to a romantic date. That isn't normal. That isn't what is done. Eduardo shook his head slowly, a soft smile appearing on his lips. Do you know what isn't normal, Camila? That someone has the courage to put the people they love above absurd social expectations. That someone is so authentic that they prefer to risk an opportunity rather than pretend to be who they are not. Camila felt her throat tighten while she processed those words she never expected to hear. Rosa watched the scene with her heart in her hand, praying silently for her daughter to find the happiness she so deserved. Eduardo continued with a soft but firm voice. Throughout this entire evening, you showed me more genuine character than 100 superficial dates full of masks and false pretenses. You showed me loyalty, unconditional love, and a strength that few people possess in this selfish world. Camila felt hot tears rolling down her cheeks, unable to stop them. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had validated her decisions in such a deep way. But she began to say. But Eduardo raised his hand gently to stop her. Please sit down. We are not going to end this night with you fleeing as if you had committed a terrible crime. Camila obeyed slowly, dropping her purse and taking a seat in the chair Eduardo pulled out for her with courtesy. Rosa sat down too, taking her daughter's hand on the table in a gesture of silent but powerful support. Eduardo returned to his place and took a deep breath before continuing to speak, organizing his thoughts carefully. I want to tell you something I haven't told anyone in a long time, he began with a serious voice. When my mother was sick with cancer in her final months, I was in the middle of launching my first major company. Camila and Rosa listened to him with absolute attention, without interrupting his intimate confession. She would call me asking me to visit her, to spend time with her, because she sensed she didn't have much left. Eduardo paused, his voice breaking slightly. But I was always busy with meetings, presentations, investors, who couldn't wait even one more day. I would tell her, tomorrow I'll visit you, Mom, or this weekend I'll come without fail. Rosa squeezed her handkerchief between her hands, feeling the pain in every word Eduardo pronounced with difficulty. She died on a Tuesday afternoon while I was closing a $1 million contract that I thought would change my life forever, continued Eduardo, with tears shining in his eyes. When I arrived at the hospital, she had already departed, and I could never tell her how much I loved her. I could never ask for her forgiveness for choosing money over her. The restaurant was almost empty now. Only a couple of tables remained occupied, and the staff discreetly cleaning the unoccupied areas. Camila felt her heart breaking for this man she barely knew, but who had already touched her soul deeply. Since that day, continued Eduardo, wiping a tear that escaped from his eye. I promised myself that if I ever had the chance to meet someone special, I would value every moment, regardless of the circumstances or others' opinions. I promised myself that I would never again put appearances or social conventions above what truly matters: people and true love. Rosa stood up impulsively and went around the table to hug Eduardo, who let himself be comforted by this maternal woman. You don't have to carry that guilt, my son. Your mom loved you, and I am sure she understood your responsibilities and your dreams. Eduardo reciprocated the hug, feeling for the first time in almost 20 years the comfort of maternal affection without conditions or expectations. Camila watched the scene with her heart overflowing with emotion, seeing how her mother offered comfort and how Eduardo accepted it with genuine humility. When they separated, Eduardo took his napkin and dried his eyes with an embarrassed smile. "Excuse me, I didn't mean to get sentimental on our first date." Camila shook her head quickly, her voice coming out broken by the emotion that overwhelmed her completely. "Never apologize for showing your true heart, Mr. Eduardo. That is the bravest thing someone can do in such a closed world." Eduardo turned to her with an intensity in his gaze that made Camila feel butterflies in her stomach. "That is why, when you arrived tonight with your mother, I didn't see a problem or an awkward situation to resolve. I saw an extraordinary woman who is choosing to be present now while she still can, instead of regretting it later like I did." The words resonated in the space between them like a declaration of unshakable principles. Camila felt something change inside her, as if a door she had kept closed out of fear was slowly opening. I don't know what to say," she murmured with a trembling voice. Eduardo extended his hand over the table, and Camilla took it after a moment of hesitation. "Say you'll stay a while longer," proposed Eduardo with a hopeful smile. "Say that this night doesn't end with flights or rushed goodbyes full of misunderstandings. Say you'll give me the chance to know you better, both of you, because frankly, I don't want this evening to end yet." Rosa returned to her chair with a smile, which she hadn't shown in months, seeing how her daughter and Eduardo looked at each other with a connection that transcended spoken words. "If you are liking this story, don't forget to like this video." The waiter approached the table discreetly and asked if they wished for anything else before the kitchen closed. Eduardo ordered 3 chamomile teas without consulting, intuiting that everyone needed something warm after so much emotion shared on that extraordinary night. When the young man retired, a comfortable silence settled among the 3. It wasn't awkward, but full of complicity and mutual understanding. Rosa watched her daughter and Eduardo with a mixture of hope and caution, praying internally for this to be real and not just a passing dream. Camila fiddled nervously with the napkin on her lap, still processing everything that had occurred in the last 2 hours. Eduardo looked at both of them with an expression that mixed tenderness and determination, as if he had made an important decision, but didn't know exactly how to express it with words. The tea arrived steaming in white porcelain cups, and the sweet aroma of chamomile filled the space between them with comforting warmth. Eduardo took his cup between his hands, letting the heat warm his fingers while he organized his thoughts carefully. "There's something else I need to tell you," he began with a soft but firm voice. "Something I probably should have mentioned earlier, but I couldn't find the right moment to do it." Camila looked up with curiosity, mixed with a little fear of the unknown. "For years," continued Eduardo, staring at his cup of tea, "I have hidden behind work because it was easier than facing the void my mother left when she died so young." Rosa nodded, understanding perfectly that defense mechanism she herself had used in different ways. "I built a successful company, earned money I never dreamed of having when I was a child in a middle-class family, achieved recognition in my technology industry." His voice became more melancholic, but every achievement felt hollow, because there was no one waiting for me at home to celebrate it really, no one to be happy for me without economic interest involved. Camila felt a pang of deep empathy for this man who seemed to have it all, but in reality had nothing of what mattered. Eduardo looked up and locked eyes with Camila with penetrating intensity. That is why I stopped believing in love a long time ago, he confessed with brutal honesty. I thought it was something that existed only in romantic movies or stories from the past, but not in the real life of a businessman like me. The women I met only saw my bank account or the opportunities I could offer them to climb socially. Rosa squeezed her daughter's hand under the table, feeling the weight of those words so sincere and painful. Javier has tried to convince me for years to try again with true love, continued Eduardo with a sad smile. He introduced me to friends, cousins, acquaintances, always swearing that this time was different from the previous ones. Camila listened to every word as if it were the most important she had heard in her entire life, but it always ended the same. Eduardo proceeded. Dates where they feigned interest in my work, only to later ask about my apartment, my car, my trips abroad. His voice filled with contained frustration. Women who investigated my company on the internet before the date to know exactly how much I was worth and how to impress me with superficial knowledge. Rosa shook her head, saddened by the loneliness this young man had experienced, surrounded by so much falseness. Eventually, I resigned myself to the idea that I would die alone, surrounded by professional success, but emotionally empty, admitted Eduardo. I stopped answering Javier's calls, suggesting dates. I stopped attending social events where I could meet someone new and potentially interesting. I convinced myself that I was fine like this, that I didn't need anyone else in my life apart from my work and my business goals. Camila felt tears accumulating in her eyes as she understood the level of loneliness Eduardo had endured for so long without complaining. The silence stretched for a moment, charged with emotion, before Eduardo continued with his liberating confession. But tonight, said Eduardo, looking directly at Camila, with eyes shining with contained emotion, you two arrived and changed everything I had stopped believing in for so long. Camila felt her heart accelerate dangerously as she processed the weight of those significant words. You didn't arrive with masks or elaborate pretenses to impress me, continued Eduardo with a trembling voice. You arrived with your most vulnerable truth, with your purest and most authentic love exposed for me to judge or accept. Rosa felt tears rolling down her wrinkled cheeks, no longer caring to hide them from anyone. Camila could have lied. She could have left her mom at home and pretended her life was different from what it really is, explained Eduardo. But she chose honesty, even if that meant risking this opportunity to find the love she so deserves. His hand moved to take Camila's on the table with comforting firmness. That showed me more real character in 30 seconds than years of superficial conversations with people who only seek material benefits. Camila squeezed Eduardo's hand, feeling a connection she'd never experienced with any other man in her life. And you, Mrs. Rosa. Eduardo turned to the mother. You reminded me why it is worth opening up to love again after so much time protecting myself behind emotional walls. Rosa smiled through tears, silently blessing this man who treated her daughter with such respect and genuine tenderness. Now it is my turn to be honest, said Camila, with a trembling voice but determined to share her own painful truth. I've had other dates in the past. Not many, because I work night shifts that make my social life difficult, but some. Eduardo nodded encouragingly, squeezing her hand gently to give her courage to continue with her confession. The first was 3 years ago. A doctor from the hospital, who seemed interested in me and getting to know me better, began Camila. We went out twice and everything was going well until I told him about my mom and our situation after my dad's death. Her expression darkened upon remembering. He literally disappeared, stopped answering my messages, and when I saw him in the hospital corridors, he pretended not to see me or changed course. Rosa lowered her gaze, ashamed, carrying guilt that didn't belong to her, but she felt anyway. Then came an engineer I met at a family gathering, continued Camila. He lasted a little longer, almost 2 months of occasional outings on weekends when I didn't work. Her voice broke slightly. But when I explained that I couldn't go out certain days because my mom was going through a strong emotional crisis, he told me verbatim that he was looking for a partner, not a nurse with a patient included in the package. Eduardo felt rage toward those cowardly men who didn't know how to value the treasure they had in front of them out of pure selfishness. The third was the one that hurt me the most, admitted Camila, with tears rolling freely down her cheeks, while Rosa stroked her hair like when she was a child. He was someone I had known since high school, a young love who reappeared in my life a year ago, promising that now we were mature adults. Eduardo listened with absolute attention, feeling every word like a blow to his own hurt chest. We went out for 4 months, and I really thought he was different, that he understood my situation and accepted it with everything included, continued Camila. He even met my mom several times and seemed to get along well with her, always being kind and respectful. Rosa remembered that young man who had filled her daughter with hopes only to destroy them later cruelly. But one day, he sat me down in a cafe and told me he loved me but couldn't compete with my mom for my attention and my time, explained Camila with a broken voice. He gave me an ultimatum. Either I put my mom in a nursing home so we could have a normal couple's life, or we ended our relationship forever. Eduardo clenched his jaw with contained fury at such a lack of humanity and basic understanding. Obviously, I chose my mom without hesitating even a second, finished Camila, but every rejection convinced me that maybe I was destined to be alone, because no man would accept my complicated reality. Rosa sobbed openly, blaming herself for her daughter's loneliness, although Camila always assured her it wasn't her fault. Eduardo felt his heart break and heal at the same time, listening to that story of unwavering loyalty. Eduardo stood up abruptly, going around the table with determined steps that surprised both women. He knelt next to Camila's chair, taking both of the young woman's hands between his, with comforting and protective firmness. "Look at me, Camila," he said with an intense voice charged with deep emotion he couldn't and didn't want to hide anymore. The young nurse looked at him through tears that clouded her vision, but not her understanding of the moment. Those 3 men were complete idiots who didn't deserve a minute of your valuable time, nor a single one of your precious tears. His voice was firm, full of absolute conviction that admitted no argument. Any man who asks you to choose between him and your mother is someone who doesn't understand what true and unconditional love means. Rosa watched the scene with her heart overflowing, seeing something she had prayed to witness for so long without losing faith. "You did the right thing every time," continued Eduardo, not letting go of Camila's hands. "Not only morally right, but right for your soul and your future with someone who truly deserves you." Camila felt something inside her break and release. Years of guilt and doubt dissolving under the sincere gaze of this extraordinary man. Never apologize for loving your mother, for taking care of her, for choosing her 1,000 times if it were necessary to do so, declared Eduardo. That doesn't make you dependent or immature, as surely those cowards told you. Eduardo stood up, but didn't let go of Camila's hands, keeping her connected to him physically, while his words created emotional bridges impossible to ignore. That makes you loyal, brave, and turns you into the type of woman any intelligent man would want by his side, forever. Camila sobbed openly, no longer trying to control the tears that fell, like liberating waterfalls of years of accumulated pain. Rosa stood up too and hugged her daughter from behind, creating a circle of love and support between the three. Eduardo continued speaking, now addressing both women with equal emotional intensity and deep respect. Tonight you gave me back something I thought I had lost forever, the moment my mother closed her eyes. The faith that genuine people exist in this world so full of superficiality and falseness. His voice broke slightly, but he didn't stop. You showed me that real love still exists. That loyalty isn't just a pretty word, but a daily and constant action. Rosa felt she was blessing this man with every fiber of her tired but hopeful being again. That is why I want to propose something that maybe sounds strange coming from someone who just met you barely a few hours ago, said Eduardo, taking a deep breath. Camila looked at him with huge eyes full of curiosity, mixed with timid hope that didn't dare grow too much yet. I want this meeting not to end here tonight, proposed Eduardo with clear determination. I want to continue getting to know both of you as a complete and inseparable package that doesn't need to apologize for existing. The words floated in the air of the almost empty restaurant, resonating with a power that none of the three could deny or ignore. What does that mean exactly? Asked Camila with a trembling voice, daring to ask what her heart already intuited, but her mind didn't dare accept. Eduardo smiled with warmth that lit up his face from the inside out, completely transforming him from the serious businessman to the vulnerable and hopeful man. It means I want to call you tomorrow to know how your day went and if Rosa slept well after this emotional night. His tone was tender, almost playful, but completely sincere. It means I want to visit you at your house, know your real world, without elegant restaurants or unnecessary formalities that only get in the way. Rosa felt her heart expand with a warmth she hadn't felt since before her husband passed away, leaving her adrift. It means I want to be present in your lives, not as an occasional distraction on weekends, but as someone constant and reliable, explained Eduardo. I want to know your simple routines, your difficult days, your moments of small but meaningful joy that build a real life together. Camila couldn't believe what she was hearing. It seemed too good to be true after so many bitter disappointments. Do you really want that? She asked with an almost inaudible voice, fearing the answer would be different from what she had just heard. Eduardo nodded with total seriousness and visible commitment in every gesture and word he pronounced with care. I really want it. Camila confirmed Eduardo with a firm voice that left no room for doubts or misunderstandings. You showed me something tonight that I had been looking for years without knowing it. Pure authenticity and unconditional love without hidden agendas. Rosa dried her tears with trembling hands, feeling that God had finally heard on her desperate prayers during so many sleepless nights. It won't be easy, warned Camila, feeling the need to be completely honest about her complicated reality. I work night shifts that change constantly, sometimes 12 hours straight without adequate rest. My mom has good days and bad days, emotionally days where she needs more attention and special care. Eduardo listened attentively without interrupting, valuing that she shared the difficult details instead of hiding them strategically. We don't have much money. Our house is small and modest in a humble neighborhood, continued Camila. We don't go to elegant restaurants like this, nor do we have sophisticated conversations about international business or financial investments. Eduardo smiled widely, his eyes shining with something that seemed like relief, more than disappointment, at this described reality. Perfect, he said, surprising both with his enthusiastic and unexpected response. Why don't I look for another elegant dinner or superficial conversation about balance sheets and business projections? I am looking for something real, something money cannot buy in any market in the world. A true family built with genuine love. Rosa let out a sob of relief and happiness mixed in equal and overwhelming proportions. Eduardo extended his hand toward Camila in a gesture that was both a question and a promise of a shared future. Will you give me the chance to try? He asked with genuine humility. Despite being a man accustomed to closing million-dollar deals with absolute confidence. This time was different because he wasn't negotiating contracts, but hearts. He wasn't closing deals, but opening doors to terrifying and beautiful possibilities. Camila looked at her mother seeking guidance or approval, as she had done all her life in important and uncertain moments. Rosa nodded with a radiant smile that erased years of accumulated sadness in the wrinkles of her tired but hopeful face. Camila took Eduardo's hand, feeling a discharge of something similar to electricity, but deeper and meaningful, running through her body. Yes, she murmured with a trembling but finally determined voice. I want to try, too, although the possibility of another painful disappointment terrifies me. Eduardo squeezed her hand with tenderness, but firmness sealing a commitment that both felt transcended a simple, romantic date. When they left the restaurant half an hour later, with Eduardo insisting on taking them home personally, despite their polite protests, something had changed fundamentally in the three. During the journey to the Independencia neighborhood, Eduardo conversed pleasantly with both women, asking questions about their lives, their tastes, their dreams postponed but not forgotten. When they arrived in front of the small but well-kept house, Eduardo got out of the car and opened the doors for both with old-fashioned but charming chivalry. Before saying goodbye, he took out his phone and asked for their numbers, promising to call the next day without fail. And in that moment, the three knew that this night had been only the beginning of something extraordinary. The days following that magical dinner were like a dream from which none of the three wanted to ever wake up. Eduardo kept his promise and called Camila the next day in the morning. A quiet Saturday where she didn't have a shift at the hospital. They talked for 2 hours about everything and nothing, sharing details of their lives that normally would take months to reveal to another person. Camila told him about her exhausting routine in the emergency room, the sleepless nights attending emergencies, the patients that marked her deeply with their stories. Eduardo listened fascinated, not feigning interest, but genuinely captivated by the passion with which she spoke of her vocation of service. He shared about his difficult beginnings in the business world, the failures no one knew, the nights where he doubted himself completely. At the end of the call, Eduardo asked if he could visit them that same afternoon at their house, without formalities or elegant pretensions. Camila felt nervousness at the idea of him seeing her humble home, but accepted because she didn't want to build anything on lies or false appearances. At 5 in the afternoon, the doorbell rang, and Rosa opened the door, with hands trembling with contained emotion. Eduardo arrived with a bouquet of simple flowers for Rosa and a box of sweet bread from a traditional bakery downtown. "I don't bring anything ostentatious because I want to know your real world, not impress you with money," he explained with a humble smile. The house was small, but impeccably clean and decorated with love in every detail visible to the naked eye. Family photos covered the walls, telling the story of decades of shared life between mother and inseparable daughter. A worn but comfortable sofa occupied the living room next to an old television that still worked perfectly well. The kitchen was tiny compared to Eduardo's, but smelled deliciously of chicken soup that Rosa had prepared all afternoon. Eduardo sat on the sofa and felt more comfortable than in any elegant business meeting he had had in years. Rosa served him pot coffee in clay cups, while Camilla showed him photo albums of her childhood with adorable embarrassment. Eduardo laughed, seeing the images of a small Camila without front teeth, dressed as a nurse at a school festival. "This is what I call real wealth," commented Eduardo, pointing at the photos and the warm atmosphere of the home. "You have something that many millionaires search for all their life without finding it: peace and genuine love at home." Rosa felt tears of gratitude for this young man who valued what others had despised or ignored completely. They dined together at the small kitchen table, the three tight but happy, sharing Rosa's soup. Eduardo declared it was the best he had tasted in his life, and wasn't exaggerating out of courtesy. When he said goodbye that night, he hugged both women and promised to return soon, without the need for special occasions. Eduardo's visits became frequent and natural, as if he had always formed a part of that humble but united family. He appeared on Wednesdays after work with food to have dinner together, because he knew Camila had the night shift and Rosa would be alone. Saturdays in the morning, he arrived early to take Rosa to the municipal market, carrying her bags and conversing with the vendors like one more from the neighborhood. Camila watched from afar how her mother flourished again under the constant attention and genuine affection of Eduardo, who expected nothing in return. Rosa laughed more. She left her room more frequently. She began cooking elaborate dishes she had stopped preparing since her husband's death. One Sunday, Eduardo arrived with tools and fixed the bathroom faucet that had been dripping for months without them being able to pay a professional plumber. "You don't have to do this," protested Camila, feeling uncomfortable with so much help received without being able to reciprocate proportionally. Eduardo shook his head while tightening a nut with absolute concentration on his task. "This is what family does: help each other without keeping score or expecting rewards in the future." The word family resonated in Camila's heart with a new and deep meaning she had never experienced with any man before. Rosa prepared fresh lemonade and brought glasses to both, while Eduardo finished the repair successfully without charging a peso. That day they ate pork carnitas tacos at the kitchen table, and Eduardo declared that those simple moments were more valuable than any business gala dinner. 8 weeks passed in this beautiful and comforting routine that healed old wounds in the three hearts hurt by past losses. Eduardo began arriving earlier and staying later, integrating completely into the daily life of mother and daughter without invading, but always present when they needed him. He helped Rosa with the heavy grocery shopping. He accompanied Camila to the hospital when she had night shifts, so she wouldn't take public transport in the dangerous early morning. The neighbors of the neighborhood started to know him and greet him as if he were part of the neighborhood since always, regardless of his expensive SUV. Don Pedro, the man from the corner store, would give Eduardo tortillas on credit like any regular and reliable customer. Doña Marta, the neighbor next door, gave him tamales on Saturdays because, according to her, he was too skinny and needed to fatten up a little. Eduardo accepted everything with genuine humility and deep gratitude, feeling that he had finally found something his money could never buy: real belonging to a community that accepted him for who he was and not for what he had in the bank. One afternoon, while Camila worked her shift at the hospital, Eduardo and Rosa sat in the small backyard of the house. "Mrs. Rosa," began Eduardo with a serious voice, "I want to speak with you about something very important that I've been thinking about for whole weeks." Rosa put her knitting aside and paid total attention, feeling that something significant was about to happen in that moment. Eduardo took Rosa's wrinkled hands between his with infinite tenderness she recognized as genuine and not manipulative. "You know I love your daughter deeply, right?" asked Eduardo, looking her directly in the eyes, with vulnerability exposed without masks. Rosa nodded with tears already forming because she intuited where this conversation, so awaited for so long, was going. "I have never felt for anyone what I feel for Camila," continued Eduardo with a trembling voice of emotion, contained but powerful. "She gave me back the capacity to believe in true love, to trust that genuine people exist without selfish, hidden agendas." Rosa squeezed Eduardo's hands encouragingly for him to continue with his important and meaningful confession for everyone. "But I also know I cannot have Camila without having you," declared Eduardo with absolute firmness. "You are an inseparable package, and I wouldn't want it any other way, because your relationship is the most beautiful thing I have seen." Rosa sobbed openly, no longer caring to hide her overflowing emotions in front of this extraordinary man who had arrived as a blessing. "I want to ask for your blessing to marry Camila," said Eduardo finally, with a clear and determined voice without doubts. "But I also want to ask you something else that's equally important for me and for the future of all of us as a family." Rosa looked at him with curiosity, mixed with maternal love, towards this young man who had won her heart completely. "I want that. When Camila and I get married, you come to live with us permanently," explained Eduardo, "not as a temporary visitor or tolerated guest, but as a fundamental part of our family that we are building together with love and mutual respect." Rosa couldn't believe what she was hearing after so many rejections and slights by other selfish suitors. "You have my blessing since the first night I saw you two together, son," whispered Rosa, hugging him tightly while both cried tears of pure happiness. 2 months after that conversation in the patio, Eduardo had planned everything carefully with Rosa's joyful complicity. It was a sunny Saturday in December, and he had asked Camila to take the day off from the hospital for a special lunch. Camila agreed without suspecting anything extraordinary, thinking it would be another one of their casual meals at some modest restaurant in downtown Monterey. That morning, Rosa acted strangely nervous and excited, dressing with more care than usual and fixing her hair with unusual diligence. "Daughter, you have to wear that nice dress we bought last month," insisted Rosa with urgency, suspicious in her voice. For a normal lunch, Mom? Asked Camilla, confused by so much inexplicable fuss. Rosa only smiled mysteriously, without revealing anything else about the secret plans of the day. When Eduardo arrived to pick them up punctually at noon, he was wearing an elegant but not ostentatious suit that made him look very handsome, according to Camilla's blushing opinion. "I thought it was just us two going," commented Camilla, seeing that her mother was also ready to go out with them. Eduardo exchanged a complicit look with Rosa before answering with a mysterious smile that didn't reveal his intentions. "Today is a special day, and I need both of you to be present, because this involves both of you equally." Camila frowned curiously, but didn't insist further, trusting that Eduardo wouldn't do anything that would make them uncomfortable or put them in an awkward situation. They got into the SUV, and Eduardo drove toward a small but elegant restaurant in San Pedro, which Rosa and Camila had never visited before. The place was intimate with only 10 tables, decorated with fresh flowers and soft guitar music, creating the perfect romantic atmosphere. The host received them as if he were waiting specifically for them and guided them toward a table by the window with a view of the beautiful interior garden. Rosa and Camilla sat down surprised by the discreet elegance of the place that clearly Eduardo had chosen with special care. The food arrived in waves of exquisite dishes that Eduardo had pre-ordered. Fresh salad as a starter, pumpkin cream soup as the second course, beef fillet for Rosa and salmon for Camilla as main courses. They conversed animatedly during lunch about future plans, recent anecdotes from the hospital and new projects from Eduardo's company that was beginning to expand internationally. Camila noticed that Eduardo was more nervous than normal, playing with his napkin and drinking water constantly, as if his throat were dry from anxiety. "Are you okay?" asked Camila, taking his hand on the table with genuine concern in her expression. Eduardo nodded, breathing deeply, as if preparing for an important speech he had rehearsed mentally for weeks. "I'm perfect. There's just something I want to tell you both, and I am a little nervous, even though I already spoke with your mom about this a while ago." Camila looked at her mother with evident confusion, but Rosa only smiled with tears already shining in her expectant eyes. Eduardo stood up slowly, his chair scraping softly against the polished wood floor of the restaurant. "Camila," he began with a trembling voice, but full of evident love that flooded every spoken word. "These last months have been the happiest of my entire life, without exaggerating even a little." His hand slid toward his jacket pocket, while Camilla began to understand what was about to happen in that moment. "You have transformed my empty existence into something full of deep meaning and real purpose beyond work," continued Eduardo. "You taught me that true love not only exists, but is worth every risk and every necessary vulnerability." Camila felt tears rolling down her cheeks, while her heart beat so strong she thought everyone in the restaurant could hear it. Eduardo took out a small blue velvet box and knelt next to the table before the emotional gaze of Rosa and some nearby diners. "Camila, would you do me the immense honor of being my wife and building a life together full of love and mutual company?" The young nurse sobbed, unable to articulate coherent words while seeing the simple but beautiful ring shining in the open box. "Yes," she finally managed to whisper between tears of overflowing happiness. "Yes, I want to marry you, Eduardo." The entire restaurant erupted in applause, while Eduardo slid the ring onto Camila's trembling finger and kissed her softly for the first time in front of everyone. Rosa cried with happiness, finally seeing her daughter loved by a truly good and genuine man. "But wait," said Eduardo, turning toward Rosa with a serious expression after the romantic moment. "There's a condition for this marriage that I need to make very clear right now." Camila looked at him, confused, not understanding what condition he could put in such a perfect and special moment as this. Eduardo took Rosa's hands with the same tenderness with which he had taken Camila's moments before in that memorable scene. "Mrs. Rosa, I only accept marrying your daughter if you accept coming to live with us permanently as an essential part of our family." His voice was firm, without leaving room for negotiations or possible alternatives to this non-negotiable condition. Not as a visitor who has to ask for permission to use the kitchen or feel uncomfortable in shared spaces, clarified Eduardo, but as the matriarch of our family who deserves respect, love, and her own comfortable space in our future home. Rosa sobbed uncontrollably. She had never imagined that a man capable of such generosity and deep understanding of what true family love meant existed. Camila hugged her mother and Eduardo simultaneously, creating a circle of love between the three that sealed the future of that nascent family. "I cannot accept that," protested Rosa weakly between tears, although her heart had already accepted the offer completely. "You need your space as a young couple, your privacy to build your marriage, without interference from meddling mothers-in-law." Eduardo shook his head roundly. "You are not an interference, Mrs. Rosa. You are the reason why Camila is the incredible woman I love with all my heart and soul." Rosa looked at her daughter, seeking confirmation that this was really what both wanted, without hidden pressures. "Mom," said Camila with a clear and firm voice, "there is no way I am marrying Eduardo and leaving you living alone in that house. We are a package deal, remember? And Eduardo understands and accepts it completely without resentment." Rosa finally gave in to the overwhelming love surrounding her from all possible directions. "Okay, son," she accepted between tears. "I accept being part of the family you are building with so much love and mutual respect." The following months were a whirlwind of preparations for the small but meaningful wedding they planned together, the three of them. Eduardo insisted on an intimate ceremony with only close relatives and true friends in a simple chapel in downtown Monterey. He wanted no ostentation or unnecessary luxuries. He just wanted to celebrate the genuine love he had found after so many years of self-imposed loneliness. Javier, his lifelong friend, was his best man and wouldn't stop bragging that he had been the successful Cupid of this beautiful story. The wedding was celebrated on a Saturday in March with perfect weather and a clear sky that seemed to bless the union of these two complementary souls. Rosa cried throughout the ceremony, seeing her daughter radiant in a simple but elegant dress that Eduardo had insisted on paying for as a special gift. When the priest declared Eduardo and Camila husband and wife, the kiss was tender and full of future promises that both planned to fulfill faithfully. The reception was at the same restaurant where Eduardo had proposed marriage weeks ago, with delicious food and mariachi music that made even Rosa dance, who hadn't stepped on a dance floor in years. Eduardo danced first with his wife and then with his mother-in-law, thanking her in her ear for raising the woman of his dreams with so much love and personal sacrifice. The new house Eduardo had bought for the three was in a quiet zone with a large garden and 3 spacious bedrooms, each with a private bathroom. Rosa had her own space on the ground floor, with easy access to the garden, where she could cultivate the flowers she loved so much without depending on anyone. Camila and Eduardo occupied the upper floor, with a view of the mountains that surrounded Monterey majestically on the horizon. The first night in the new house, the three dined together in the large kitchen, sharing laughter and future plans full of renewed hope. Eduardo looked at the 2 women who were now his complete family and knew that he had finally found what his mother had wanted for him: a home full of true love, where money was the least important thing and hearts were the most valuable. This story reminds us that true love appears when we stop looking for perfection and start valuing authenticity without masks or false pretenses. Eduardo, Camila, and Rosa teach us that families are not always born of blood, but of the conscious choices we make every day. Sometimes what the world calls complications are in reality the greatest blessings in disguise, waiting to be recognized and valued. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. For more stories that will fill your soul with hope and renewed faith, always remember that true wealth is not in bank accounts nor in material goods accumulated over years. True wealth is in the people you love and who love you back without conditions or selfish expectations. It is in the simple moments shared around a humble table. It is in the unwavering loyalty that withstands tests and others' rejections. May God bless your life with genuine people who value your heart above any external appearance. And may you never have to apologize for loving deeply those who raised you with sacrifice and absolute dedication. Amen.